approve. Oh, there's my light. Hi. Yes, I'm here. Let's do this. Oh, yeah, that's not gonna work, is it? Ah, crap. Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me okay? You're the first one to pop up. Or Liza, I guess it could be. Yeah, so hopefully you guys can hear me good and everything's coming through. Please, fingers crossed. I'm not getting any comments yet, so nope, that didn't work. Right, so we'll just start and hope it's working. A little frantic Gail, sorry, it's hot. I'm a little verklempt. So I am just, oh, hooray! Thank you so much, Harlan, for saying that. I appreciate it. So it seems I'm coming through loud and clear. So I thought I would just start out talking a little bit about audiobooks for you guys. The reason I chose this is because I've gotten into doing audiobooks recently, and so I thought you would like some little behind the scenes stuff with audiobooks, and also why. So I wanted to start by saying how much, hello Katie, how much I love audiobooks. So I was raised on audiobooks, basically. I didn't have a television when I was a kid, and so in my day it was books on tape. And that is pretty much what I was raised on. I would listen to them for hours and hours. I was a geeky kid. I would just color in my coloring books or draw and listen to a lot of the British audiobooks like Paddington Bear and Winnie the Pooh, and I think it influenced my writing a lot. I think a lot of those British isms and stuff, not only from my mother, who's British, reading to me as a kid, but also all of these fantastic narrators with these amazing voices doing these children's books from the UK. Tom's Midnight Garden, all that. It was wonderful. It was something I could do myself. I had my own little tape deck and I would just get these books on tape out of the library and listen to them. So that is my love for audiobooks. It really comes from my childhood. And I tend to think that, especially the Parasol Protectorate books, I write thinking about audio pretty, I don't know whether it's conscious in the back of my head, but I do think about it. I always do an Outloud Pass when I write, or at least I try to if I have time on my deadline schedule, which basically is me reading the whole book out loud to an empty office and a confused cat on occasion. And it just helps me catch mistakes. It helps me catch those points in my writing when the tone is really sing-song. A lot of authors will get into a cadence, especially if you write funny stuff. And sometimes when I'm writing an action scene, I really want to break the cadence up. I want the words to be a little bit choppier. And when I'm reading out loud, I can see the points where I want to take a breath, or I need to take a breath, or I want the sort of the beat of the scene to be faster or slower. So reading out loud really helps me with that. So that's some of my relationship to audio as a kid and now I guess as a writer. And so having audiobooks of my independent stuff was really important to me, but because I do listen to them, I'm also really nervous about narration. I don't like it as a general rule. There are always exceptions, but I don't like it when an author reads their own book. I find a professional narrator or a voice actor or an actor does a much better job. So if you guys are big audiophiles and big into audiobooks, I'd love it if you left me some recommendations in the comments of some of your favorites or some of your favorite like matches of when a reader and a narrator seem to be really well suited to each other. I think that's magic when that can happen. So when I was picking my narrators, it's always kind of a long part of the process when I'm choosing narrators for my books. With my traditionally published stuff, the publishing house comes to me with a couple of samples, and I'm lucky enough to get to choose. Not every author does, but I usually get to listen to a couple of voices, and then and then I say who I like the best. And frankly, usually we all tend to like the same person. So that is how Moira Quirk came into our lives. Moira does both the Finishing School books and the Prudence, the Custard Protocol books. And Emily was pretty much chosen for me. Emily Gray reads the Parasol Protectorate, but she's wonderful. I couldn't have chosen better. So I'm really happy with my narrators. Jenna says Stephen Fry is a favorite. I love Stephen Fry. I think he's a wonderful narrator. Although he's very upper crust. So he does have a certain aura about him when he does stuff. Hugh Laurie is also a wonderful reader. He reads all the P.G. Wodehouse books on tape. He's great. But a reader is really part of the process. So I take some time to pick who I want to read, to listen to voice samples, and make sure that the person I'm getting really suits the book. And that's one of the reasons that an audiobook takes a little bit longer, is me trying to find the right voice for it. But once I've found a good voice, I'm really excited about it. So Kurt Graves narrates the Sumit solution, and I think he did a really, really good job. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we get to use him again for the next book. So audio, the downside of audio, of course, there's always a downside. The downside of audiobooks is that they're really expensive to produce, because I want a professional to do the reading, and I want a professional high-end producer to do my production for me so that it's as good as possible. And that means it takes time, and that means it's expensive. So that is the big downside of audio, and sometimes with some of my books, that's another reason it takes a little bit longer, because I just don't have the funds saved up yet to outlay that much for the audio to go into production. So when you're waiting for your audiobook, those are some of the reasons to keep in mind, but I'm trying to give you the best thing possible. Anywho, so that pretty much starts off our Facebook Live today with some audio chat, and now I'm hoping we can pretty much just segue into our usual fantastic Q&A. You guys always have the best questions for me, so I'm always excited just to start answering your questions. I have a little post-it note here ready to write down anything you ask. I know it takes a little while for the feed that I'm seeing to get caught up to the questions that you're asking, but I'm also thirsty, so I'm gonna take a drink of water. Okay, so we got any questions coming in? I'm excited about this. Sadly, my little Tribble doesn't seem to work with this setup for Facebook Lives. So I was all excited because I've had fancy audio. Then sadly, we'll have to do some futzing to make it work. Janice wants to know if I have a Scottish actor for audiobooks for the short stories in mind. So I would use a Scottish actor if the main character were Scottish, and I haven't really done that. I mean, Gavin is a secondary point of view character for Poison or Protect, and he is Scottish. And I did think about swapping a different voice for different point of view characters. So the male point of view would be told with a male narrator and female with a female. But that doesn't always work well, because the narrators have to match up in cadence and in the way they pronounce all the names and stuff. So it's really difficult to do that. So I tend to prefer just to pick one narrator who does the whole book. Suzanne, who does, what did she do? Poison or Protect. So she is actually Scottish, I think. I'm pretty sure she's Scottish. So what she is doing actually is putting on a British accent for most of the narration, and then she's using her native accent when she does Gavin's character, which I think is pretty cool. So Francesca wants to know if I'm doing any more short stories soon. I have a short story that's in rough draft form, and it's the story you guys, I think, have been waiting for. It is the Hedgehog Incident. And it is on layaway at the moment while I'm working on some other projects. It needs a couple of read-throughs and some editing from me before it even goes on to anybody else. So that is and I haven't quite decided what I'm gonna do with it yet. There's a couple places it can go. So until I have all my ducks in a row pretty much for next year, I don't know. But I am going to try to bring it out next year. So that's the next short story you're gonna get. Unlike the other 4 short stories, it's not going to be produced as a full cast audiobook, at least not at the moment. I don't have any intentions to do that. That was part of a Kickstarter campaign a couple years ago. So I don't know if that short would ever hit audio, but it is just a short story, so not too bad to read, frankly. All right, there's some awesome recommendations going on for audiobooks, so that's pretty exciting. Katie wants to know how I capture so many different characters' voices throughout your canon. I think what Katie is asking about is kind of the tone of delivery in dialogue that characters have, and how you sort of know instinctively that maybe Ivy is talking or that Ivy has come on stage, even if I don't say her name. I think that's what's going on. I think it helps that a lot of my characters really live in my brain. I do see them and hear them as if it was a movie screen in front of me. So I know Lyle so well, that's how I know what he's gonna say. And then of course I use the characters' dialogue as part of their characterization. The easiest example of that is Professor Braithrope with the what that he says all the time. And that's actually, I mean, it was fun to write, but it's also a trick as an author, because I can give him a line of dialogue, that character, and when I use the what as his little verbal tick, I never have to attribute that dialogue to him. My readership knows instinctively that it's him because those two words were said. So I will use verbal ticks for my characters. So one of the things with the Sumage solution is there's a lot of swear words in there, but one of the characters comes from Boston and the other character is a West Coaster. So I chose different swear words for them to use. I'm not going to tell you which is which, but now that you know this, you can read the book and see it, so that just by the nature of what cuss word was being used, you kind of knew which character was doing the swearing. So it's a bit of a crass example, but so one of the things I do is occasionally, especially with the sillier characters, is I'll assign them verbal tics, like Lord Akeldama's italicization when he's talking, so you kind of always know he's talking because he uses this really flowery language and he always has all of these italicized words. So there's a little insider trick to Ty wants to know if they missed anything, and nothing. I talked a little bit about audiobooks and apologized for being late because of dumb California traffic. Everybody's being very complimentary about my audiobooks, so thank you. Thank you, thank you. Casey wants to know, oh, we have a technical question on world building. What happened to vampires post, the vampires post supersaturation question. So this is a bit of a spoiler for those who haven't finished Sumage Solution, and soullessness. So the answer to that is I have not dealt with either of these things yet in that series. And you're just gonna have to wait and see. Oh, I can be so crafty. I'm sorry, but sometimes that's the answer from an author in an active universe. Little pause. Oh, somebody mentions Barbara Rosenblatt as a reader, and I loved her reading style. I think she was one of the best audiobook narrators of all time. I would pretty much listen to she could read the phone book and I would have listened to that on audio tape. She was wonderful. Emily K would like a tea recommendation, something dark and different. Well, one thing that I always throw out there is Twining's 1706 Strong. It's mostly a super malty Assam leaf, and then something else is mixed in there. It's very strong and very caffeinated, so worth tasting. It happens to be a tea that I love a lot. It's not easy to get, but you can poke about the internet and get it given to you if you don't live in the UK. If you want something a little mellower for an afternoon, for example, I would recommend trying a Yorkshire Gold. I think it's a really underserved tea, and it's quite delicious, but it's not as strong. It's a lighter on the caffeine end of things, and it can have, you know, a bit of Darjeeling in it or some cumin that kind of has some brighter notes, some brisker notes. So Yorkshire Gold and 1706 Strong, and it is the year 1706. There's a couple of my recommendations. Ty would like to know what Imogen thinks of Madame LeFou's extensive mustache collection. I suspect Imogen thinks what I thought when one day my best friend put on a mustache and smooched me. And I thought, that tickles. So I suspect Imogen thinks it tickles and probably likes it. I think Imogen is disposed to like most quirks of Madame LeFou's character, no matter what form they take. This is just a little reminder, which Ty just exemplified, which is if you leave me a question that's over like a sentence or two, a couple of lines, I can't read the second half. It's just the way the interface works. So one sentence or so if you're going to leave a question, please, guys. Thank you. Ty wants to know how my event went today. So for those of you who don't follow me extensively, I had a presentation today. I haven't taught or done an educational presentation in a long time. Shall we say 6 years, 7 years? And back in the day when I was doing it, I used PowerPoint. So for this new presentation, I learned Keynote. Aren't I sophisticated? I loved it. It was a really fun program to work with, which I don't say about having to try a new program lightly. I'm a real technophobe, so I really loved Keynote, and I think the presentation went really well. I hope so. A lot of people came up to me afterwards and said how helpful it was, so that's why I did it, to kind of pay it forward. This was for my RWA chapter, so a lot of kind of younger up-and-coming authors were there in the audience, and I basically was like, here's some of the mistakes I made, and please don't make them, try not to make them. So I hope they got use out of it. I really enjoyed putting the deck together, I must say, so from my end, it was great. Annabelle wants to know if we're going to get some Kitsune stories. So I'm presuming that you read Sumage Solution, so you know it's chock-a-block full of Kitsune. They're not main characters, but they're there. One as a main character hasn't like appeared in my brain yet, but they definitely have a pretty active role in the second Sumage book, which the San Andreas Shifter book. So you can definitely expect more of them. I do love them. I love the mythology. I love kind of there's differences between the Chinese fox shifter spirits and the Japanese versions and even the Korean version. So I'm really intrigued by them. So I plan to keep them around. Ty wants to know if Viv was inspired by Professor Braithwaite's mustache. I never thought of that, but I think that's genius. So yes, she was very impressed by Professor Braithwaite's mustache, and that informed her adult experience with the mustache. Zelda wants to know gardens for your characters. This is a really fortuitous question because the short story I was just telling you about actually takes place in a garden. The whole it's an evening party and all of the exciting events are taking place outside the party in this garden of this fabulous townhouse. I love gardens. My mother is a professional gardener. She's a landscaper. That's what she did. That's how I was raised. And I, of course, am an introverted reader, so a lot of my childhood memories are curled up somewhere in a garden, amongst the baby's tears or the moss, in some shady corner under a fern reading a book, usually a library book. So I identify very closely with reading outside. I know it's strange, but I love sort of paintings and images. I kind of collect them on Pinterest of girls and women in period dress reading outside. It's just really, I don't know, evocative or something. So yeah, I do associate gardens with characters and I do think about it. It's not always something that I end up describing in stories. So, I mean, can you imagine what Lord Akaldama's garden is like? I'm sure it's just so many colors and so many, peonies and lilacs, and in spring it's just this riot of color. Or perhaps he's very controlled about it and only yellow flowers are allowed in the front yard, and then he changes all of the curtains and suddenly we have to have pink flowers in the front yard. I think it's just really kind of fun to think about. I mean, there's a little mention And of course, it's a sadness of vampires is they only get to see gardens at night. But there is a mention about the queen after they move out to Wolsey Castle, Countess Nadasti, kind of looking at the garden and the layout of the garden at night and how she gets to do that now that they're not in town anymore. And I do think about the fact that vampires, for example, because they're only going to see these gardens at night, are probably into kind of the aesthetic in terms of arrangement and topiary and things like that, because these are shapes and things that you would see under moonlight as opposed to flowers in bloom. So it is something I think about. Ty says on the Wikia, it says I is a trans man. The Wikia is crowdsourced, so I think someone put that in. I don't remember if I did or somebody else. This is the challenge with my books, is that if you are dealing with a culture where it's incredibly complicated, talking in terms of what in some Arabic cultures and in India is a third gender, using a term like trans man is a Western term that you're then trying to reapply to not only a different place, but a different time where they didn't even have that term. So the answer is, I don't know, because rather like in the context of Madame LeFou and her gender fluidity, she herself as a character didn't have the modern parlance or language to be able to define herself as something like gender fluid. And therefore, me as a writer, I struggle to define some of these characters using modern day language. And I know that's not a nice, concrete answer, but for me, that's kind of one of the joys of gender fluid, is that there is no nice, tidy box or specific way to describe some of these characters. And I know that's that's hard. Human beings really like to categorize. It's part of our nature. But sometimes that's the best answer you get. So perhaps the wiki entry should say trans man ? in brackets or something to satisfy this problem. But yeah, it is something I struggle with writing the more gender fluid characters in my books, because they don't work for the time period with our modern terminology imposed on them. And so it's hard for me to talk about. Yeah, you can see I'm sort of struggling. Oh my god, so people are reporting in from all over the world. Hello, everybody. I love knowing where you're coming in and tuning in from, but hello to Hawaii. So we want some background on Aggie. All right, so yes, I know why Aggie Finkelington is so awful, and she has a very good reason. Most of the time when my characters are pretty awful, they have a good reason for it. So I hope from reading Prussia you kind of understand her a little bit more, and I really hope with the Channing novella next year that you finally understand why Channing is the way Channing is. I kind of love to do that. I do believe that people in real life, when they're nasty or awkward or having a really hard time or bitter, often it's not just that people are evil, it's that they have a really good reason for behaving that way. That has to do with upbringing or past or tragedy or something. So I do like to write that and hopefully change your minds on a character who you thought was one way. So Aggie is one of those characters, and I've always kind of known she has a reason, especially for disliking Rue as much as she does. So you will definitely learn more about her, but you're not going to get all of the answers until the last Custard Protocol book, which is number 4. So, but you will get all the answers, I promise. Either that or I'll have to write a book for Aggie. Or a short story or a novella. You know me. I do try to tie up as much as possible in a nice little bow, but I can't always do every side character. But I'm going to try with Aggie. I haven't written that book yet, though, but she is slated to have her have her explained. Melinda wants to know how my last writing retreat was. Okay, so this was, I'm going to leave out some details because it was interesting, you guys. It was very interesting. It was a artist residency as opposed to a writing retreat, and I was the only genre author who was there, or commercial, even the only commercial fiction author. Sorry. Everyone else was a literary author of some kind, and I think maybe I felt like I had a little bit. I felt a little imposter syndrome-y, because these are people who legitimately, and here's my anecdote, sat down at breakfast and said, at breakfast, mind you, 7:30 in the morning, I really think I've already read Ulysses twice, and I really think I need to read Ulysses a couple more times before I get it. And I was like, I have nothing to say. I can't participate in this conversation. I'm not a literary person. I don't really like what you would call, I guess, high literature. I find it pretty universally depressing, and I don't really need to read that. I've always been someone who likes escapist fantasy and science fiction and romance, and so it was rough socially, I'll say, this last retreat that I went on, and I learned that an artist residency is probably not for me. I did wonder why they let me in at all, like, so yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't as productive as I wanted, but I did manage to write the Channing novella, and I did manage to write the short story, and I also managed a proposal that my agent wanted. So I did get a lot of work done, not as much as I traditionally can get done at a retreat that's kind of with like-minded authors. But, you know, but live and learn. That kind of retreat is not for me. But I just, at this last meeting I was just at, got a beat on a couple more retreats. So hopefully. For those of you who don't know, I really love to do writing retreats where I kind of go away for a week with a bunch of other authors. And it's just super productive for me. I find I think, don't tell anybody, I think I'm just really competitive. I like to sit across from other authors and be like, so how many words have you done today? And then it like incentivizes me either to win or to try and catch up. So I work really well on writing retreats. It's just this last one I was on perhaps wasn't everything that I had hoped for. But live and learn. Scrolling through for some more questions. I'm going to take a drink of water while I do that. Lord Akaldama would have night blooming flowers? Absolutely. He would scour the empire for them. Oh. Ty and Frankie think that we should update I's entry on the Wikia to non-binary. So, somebody who does some Wikia stuff, go, be free. Make the adjustment. Ty is recommending that there be a gender and sexuality page in my Wikia, and I'm recommending that Ty write it. They who spot the problems are responsible for the solution. Oh, Kevin is reporting in from Houston to say that he survived the storm. Hooray! Welcome! That's amazing. I've been super, super worried about Houston. I've got friends there because I go so often, and of course the wonderful Murder by the Book is in Houston, so one of my favorite bookstores. So fingers crossed. I'm super worried about all the lovely employees from the bookstore, and yeah, I actually pinged Locus magazine recently to say, hey, could you guys give us some information in the next magazine on how Murder is doing? So I'm hoping everything's all right. Chloe says that after Poison or Protect, she loved Prussia, which is so great. This is the thing about being an author is I just like to manipulate your emotions. That's all I do. So I love it when I can change people's minds about a character, especially when I set them up to be so bad, and then I can change it all up. Nerds! Chloe says that literary is a genre. I think we could argue about it forever, but for me, literary means non-genre with a capital G, and genre is everything that comes out of the Gothic novel movement of the Victorian era. So genre commercial fiction is all the stuff that owes its existence to the Gothics. So mysteries, suspense, science fiction, fantasy, and romance, to name but a few. Also cozies and westerns, adventures, all that sort of stuff. And then literary is not that. So when I'm using those two terms, that's what I mean. Whether I'm using them correctly or not is possibly because I'm not a literary author, so I don't study it. So I don't know the academic names for categories. Harleen, is that how you say your name? I hope that's how we say your name. What do I think about Katie Cross? I don't know. Not read her. Sorry. Yeah, strangely enough, I don't read, I think she's a steampunk author or has a steampunk series. I don't read widely in steampunk intentionally. Because I don't want my voice colored by another author's voice. I would hope that I'm confident enough in my own voice, but I still worry about it. So I actually don't read that widely in steampunk. It's one of the reasons you see me talking so much about contemporary romance or high fantasy, which is what we're reading right now in the book group. We're reading Forgotten Beasts of Eld. And that's because I tend to try and read something as different from what I write as possible. Military and space opera are a couple of my favorite genres because it's not something I've written or really intend to write, although I might someday, anything's possible. But it certainly, it means that when I'm reading, I kind of want to read something as different as possible from what I'm writing so I don't get influenced. A lot of people have actually studied lit, so I'm really sorry if I said anything to offend. I hope I didn't. I have done a lot of literature classes. I took a European Bildungsroman at one point, which was slightly torturous, modern American, like postmodernists and stuff. So I have read my fair share for academic reasons, but it's not my degree. I don't have an English degree from university. I have an archaeology degree, which is social science. So Ty wants to know how Aggie is defined. I don't know yet. Sorry, Ty, I haven't figured it out. I'm hoping she's gonna talk to me. I feel she in the back of my head. So I think, I don't know. I don't even know she's a dyke. I think she's a dyke. I think that's probably how she'd define herself. Yeah, I'm not quite sure yet. Sometimes I don't have all the answers, even for my own universe. Stein wants to know if it would be possible for a female wolf or a vampire to have a baby with a male preternatural. Okay, so, the problem is that, okay, no, can't answer that, sorry. Hold on a second. Possible for a female wolf, like Boadicea. I suppose it is possible. Yes, it's possible. I think I even say in one of the books that one of the only previous known metanaturals was the result of a queen and a male preternatural. I'm pretty sure I said that at some point. This is why I have beta readers, because I forget what I've written. Ty wants to know if I know how busy they are. Yes, I know. You don't have to stay. You can... And I would like to remind you that you have chosen this yourself. You will keep going back to school. Francesca reports in that Murder by the Book is safe. Oh, thank God. And they offered it up as shelter. Oh my God, that's so sweet. Murder by the Book is Houston's big genre bookstore for anybody. That's so good to know. I'm so glad. And that's so sweet. Casey wants a whole book about Imogen and Channing broing it about together. Wasn't that fun? Yeah, it was really fun to write Channing being big, nice. I mean, still an arrogant twat, but being really nice for a change. Yeah, so that would be really fun to write. Sherry wants to know if I'm excited about the new Mummies. I'm always excited about mummies. This is the face of a girl who loves her a mummy. Oh. Shoot, I lost my questions for a second there. Facebook Live has, as usual, changed the interface since the last time I did this, which was just a month or two ago. Havayan and Lecky. Okay. I tried. And a little bit like Left-Handed Darkness, which I also tried. I'm sorry. I am ashamed. I couldn't do it. I struggled too much with the gender complexity. In the case of Left Hand, there's a third gender that it's given different pronouns, and in the case of Lecky, everyone is she. And I just, like, it hurt to read because my brain had to be engaged too much. And this is a terrible admission, but I just don't want to think that much while I'm reading. I just want to escape. I just want to pick up a book and have it carry me away. So I tried Anne Lecky's first book, Ancillary Justice, and I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry. Please don't take me as an example or a criticism or anything, but I just struggled too much with it, so. Annabelle wants to know if Emma will narrate more of my books. I really, really hope so. So she did not do Poison or... Emma is the narrator for Romancing the Inventor. She did not do Poison or Protect because she was not comfortable with a Scottish accent. So, and I didn't want to push her if she's not comfortable with it. I'd rather someone who knew that they were good at it and can do it. So that's why we went with Suzanne. But I definitely have Emma in mind for future narration. She's super busy now, as she should be. Her podcast, which is called Tea and Jeopardy, that I highly recommend, won the Hugo Award this year. Well deserved. So yeah, if you want to hear her beautiful voice, you can hear it on her podcast, which I think is every other week or so. But I would love, love, love to use her again. So it's just a matter of the right story coming on. So the next book that I have coming out is Romancing the Werewolf, and that's all male point of view. So I'm going to look for a male narrator for that, a British male voice. And so it will be, and then the next book after that that I will probably have to narrate or get the narrator for is How to Marry a Werewolf, and that's Channing's book. But the love interest female character is American, so I will be getting an American voice for that one. So I won't be using Emma for a little while, but I definitely want to use her again as soon as it's right for the book. Julie wants to know if the book group is public. It is. I call my book group Coupe des Book, playing on the idea of Carriger pigeons. And it is on Goodreads. If you're on Goodreads, you can join the group in the discussion there. Or I just announce the book as widely as I can at the beginning of the month. So I announce it on like Twitter and Facebook and everywhere. And then I'll post it appears in every blog post that month as well that I do. At the bottom, it'll be like the Coupe de Book pick for this week is whatever book it is. So I chose Forgotten Beasts of Eld because it's one of my favorite books of all time, and it is it's finally getting released in ebook and has a new release this month, so that's kind of why I chose it. And I got to write the foreword for it, which was like the pinnacle, as far as I'm concerned, of being a professional author. To be asked to write a foreword for a formative book of your childhood is like the best. Like, I'm practically crying. It's the best thing ever. So such a profound honor. So that's another reason I chose it this month. And yeah, and basically we chatter about it over on Goodreads. Not too much, but somewhat. And then I will often do a book review, or if I can get a hold of the author, I'll do an author interview about that book during the month of the read through. So I started the book group several years ago now. I think it's been going for almost 3 years. And I started it because one of the questions I get all the time is, what are you reading? And finally I was like, well, why don't I just pick a book every month and we can all read it together? Yeah, so you should feel free to talk about it over on the Parasol Protectorate Facebook group if you want to chatter. Yeah, and sometimes I pick something that everybody loves, and sometimes people are like, Gail, what are you thinking? I try to pick, you know, romance, a YA, a fantasy, you know, like I try and pick pretty widely over the different genres that I love. Because you never know what people are going to love. And then usually at the end of the year, I ask you guys to vote for your favorite of the books. And I'm always pretty startled about what people love. So I think last year or the year before, it was Naomi Novik's Uprooted. And I loved that book. I picked it. Everybody in the group thought it was the best read that they had that year. But you couldn't get anything kind of more different from my stuff. I mean, it was serious. It was based on a fairy tale or like a rewritten Russian folklore. And yeah, but you guys all really loved it. So I'm always startled what people are enjoying. And that's part of the fun of the book group for me. Pamela wants to know if I read, I read a lot of space opera. Space opera is one of the genres I read a lot in and really enjoy. I like Sharon Lee and Steve Miller's Laden Universe a lot. Yes, in fact, it was Anne McCaffrey who got me into space opera and Mercedes Lackey, because I was reading them as a teenager in fantasy form, and the Pern books, which are basically fantasy that suddenly became sci-fi. And it was through the act of following them as a voracious reader and trying to get more of their books that I started to read science fiction at all, really. I was much later to sci-fi than I was to fantasy. And yeah, so definitely Anne McCaffrey, absolutely. Harleen wants to know if there are going to be any more of the mangas. Well, you can go to my website, FAQ number 3, I think it is, for the manga question. The short answer is no. Rem wanted to do her own stuff, and I didn't really want to continue without her as my artist because I felt like they were great with her. And I also feel like the first 3 books really stand well as a trilogy, so I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do the last 2. So, and it was really kind of an unexpected joy to get a manga at all. Almost no authors get to have their novels made into graphic novels. So it was a privilege, but 3 is what I get, I think. Ty's getting very excited by the idea of lesbian engineers. Clearly, I'm pretty excited by that idea, too. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm trying to catch up to your comment stream. This is one of those points where I'm going to ask you to pause on the comments for a second while I get caught up. Ty wants to know if Madame LeFou ever tries to twirl her mustache and then forgets she isn't wearing one. I love the idea of somebody having this habit and then just being like, oh, right, I don't have a mustache. Jessica wants to know if there's anything that surprised me about my characters the longer I get to know them. Oh, yeah, that happens to me quite a bit. So one of the prime examples is Biffy. Biffy was really a side throwaway character. I originally wrote him in Solas just to kind of give a highlight and a name to Lord Akeldama's relationship with his drones, just to show a little bit more about Lord Akeldama's character. Biffy wasn't really meant to have this whole other life. And then I ruthlessly used him as a plot device in Blameless. And so his whole character evolution, I had no idea what was going to happen to him. I had no idea he would then become a secondary point of view character, because I had been using Lyle as my secondary point of view, and then I couldn't obviously use Lyle because there are too many revelations in connection to his character, so I had to use Biffy. And so Biffy became this kind of all-important character that I never thought he would be. So yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I have it all planned out. So like Ivy, for example, I always knew her character arc. I knew she knew. I knew what she was going to become from the get-go, but Biffy really, really surprised me and has probably since then been the most surprising of my characters that I've ever written. I'm sorry, I keep drinking so much water. I had that crazy presentation, and so I was speaking a lot, and I'm just pretty dehydrated at the moment. Angelica wants to know if I've read Max Gladstone's craft series. No, but you are not the first to have recommended it to me. And I have met Max, who is a charming man. So is his wife. They are totally adorable. So yeah, if you like Max's stuff, hooray, that's good to hear. And Sarah says thank you because she's read so many new authors because of my recommendations, which is great. I'm so happy about that. One of the things I do try to do is pick authors that I feel like are less known, either because they're older authors who've sort of fallen by the wayside, or because they're indie authors who just haven't gotten the attention that I really wish their book had gotten. So one of the things that I do with my book group is I try to pick some pretty lesser known books. Sometimes I'll pick something pretty popular, but Stein wants to know if I read manga myself and what's my favorite. Yes, it should come as no shock that I read a lot of yoi, but my favorite is Black Butler. That's an easy question. Annabella's brokenhearted by Biffy's fate. Trust me, it'll all be okay. Romancing the Werewolf. It's out November 5th. And hopefully everything will be well. Okay, great. It looks like I've reached the end of the comments. So how are we doing on... Ooh, heh. Time? No. All right, so Facebook changed the interface so it now doesn't tell me how long I've been recording for. Would someone like to report in? Tell me how long I've been recording for? We can entitle this video, Gail Drinks a Lot of Water. Or have we frozen? I suppose that's a possibility too. Nope, we're good. Nessa! Hi, Nessa Bean. This hat was a gift from Rachel, who is my alpha reader. Master Frankie wants to know if I'm going to be on tour for Romancing the Werewolf. The answer is, oh, thank you guys, 48 minutes, good. Someone give me an hour when I'm hit an hour, please. No, I'm not going to tour for Romancing the Werewolf. I am considering being in World Fantasy, which is in San Antonio, and there's a possibility I might be in the Midwest, although that seems to be falling through. Oh, no, where I was going to do was go to Houston, but I think maybe I'll let Houston recover for a little while before I descend upon them. So probably not. November is not a great time to travel, and you know, so probably not. But I'll be doing lots of live stuff for it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Stein wants to know, we'll try Black Butler. Sure, give it a try. It's not for everybody. It's a little dark. Yoi, Y-O-A-I is how you spell yoi, and it means boy, love. So, Janice wants me to go to Dickens Fair for tea. Yeah, I love Dickens Fair. I used to work the Dickens Fair for years, but it's gotten really crowded. So, I don't know. Yeah. Zelda just said, thank you for sharing breakfast. So I don't know what time zone you're in, Zelda, but thank you for joining me while you had your breakfast. Melinda wants to know if Emerald City Comic Con is on my horizon. It is currently my favorite Comic Con. For those of you who are in Seattle, it's a fantastic Comic Con to go to. It's in March. I'm not going next year. I have too much going on already in March, unfortunately. But I am definitely going to try to come back. Misty wants me to come to South Georgia. I don't know about that. And Harleen wants to know if I've been to New Zealand twice now already. I love it. New Zealand is great. It's the only place in the world I've ever been where the tea is as good as the coffee. Usually you trade one for the other. So I love New Zealand. And of course the lamb is to die for. It's always about food, you guys. That's the reason I travel. I mean, is ostensibly for books, but it's really just to eat. So yeah, New Zealand's wonderful. I think they are bidding for 2020 Worldcon, and if they win, I will try to return to New Zealand. I will try. No promises though. Annika wants to know if I watch anime. Frankly, I don't watch much. I don't watch much television, period. It's one of the sacrifices I've made being a writer. I would mostly rather read, so I tend to be horribly out of touch in terms of genre TV. So, people keep asking me, are you watching The Expanse? Are you watching? And I just am usually, I'm sorry, no. All right, now is the time. We're nearing the end here, you guys, where I ask you to ask any questions that I might have missed in the thread. I'm sorry. Vanessa wants to know if I'm going to Worldcon in Dublin. Yes, currently the plan is indeed to go to Worldcon in Dublin. Congratulations to the Dublin bid. They won Worldcon in 2019. So next year I will be in Ireland. I have never been to Ireland. I've been to Scotland and England many times, but never to Ireland. So that is the plan. Tickets haven't been bought yet, so I make no promises, but hopefully next year. And knowing me, that means I'll probably bum around Scotland and England as well. So fingers crossed, I will be able to do a couple events when I'm doing that. Any final questions, you guys? Apparently there are a couple of cats in my audience, which is pretty great. Katie wants to know what my feelings on feederism as a romantic enhancement. I have no idea what you're talking about, Katie. You just used like 6 words in a row that I don't understand. I'm an ignoramus. What's happening with the Crowdrat follow-up? I have an outline for it, but I just am too busy with other deadlines and projects right now to write it, but I promise I will write it someday. That is why Crowdrat has not been released as an ebook yet, because I don't want to give you guys the first book without the second one ready to go, and it just hasn't been ready to go. Pamela has been secretly shipping Aggie and Percy. Guess that's not to be. Anything's possible. I would say that nobody's sexuality is firmly fixed in my books. Not even Lord Akaldama's. Charlotte would like to know what Dama would do in the 1920s and 30s style-wise. Well, I suspect those fabulous silk pajamas, the really colorful one, the evening pajamas they were called, that were super popular in the 20s. I think Lord Akaldama had something to do with those. Ellie Hunter wants to know why I'm so amazing. Oh, thank you. I'm a normal, slightly sweaty person, just like everybody else at the moment. No more questions. Yay! P.S. The hashtag from Ty. Thank you, Ty. Where do I like to stay in London? I like to stay near Russell Square whenever I'm in London. That's my favorite part of London. That is, for those of you who aren't really familiar, that is pretty much behind the British Museum. I don't know why. Bedford Place, off of Bedford Place, there are a bunch of hotels and things there. And yeah. There's a Quaker hotel. My grandparents were part of, they weren't Quakers, but they were part of the Friends, and so they had membership there, so I would often stay there with my mother when I was a kid in London, and therefore kind of Russell Square and Bedford Place and that area behind the British Museum. And of course I'm an archaeologist, so I love the British Museum, so that was kind of my home turf in London, and it really hasn't changed since I was a kid. So that's usually where I stay. I stay in that area. Oh, Katie is asking me about a feeding kink. Oh, yeah. Maybe I have a self-fulfilled feeding kink. Yeah, I don't think I really get sexual satisfaction from it, but I am just a glutton. Yeah, of the deadly sins, gluttony is the one for me. Christiana wants to know what inspired Lord Akeldama. At this juncture, everybody, go ahead and stop asking questions, and I'm just going to finish up what we've got. So the inspiration for Lord Akeldama is pretty much that my dad is a beat poet and was pretty heavily involved in the beat movement in the San Francisco Bay Area. So when I was a little kid, we spent a lot of time in and out of artists' communities in San Francisco, which essentially meant that my world was full of aunties, uncle aunties, so to speak. And there are a number of performance aunties who were in my life that inspired Lord Akeldama. So yeah, a lot of my gay characters are kind of inspired from that part of my childhood. Ray suggests that Lord Akeldama, or someone has suggested that Lord Akeldama would wear a zoot suit. I think a zoot suit is a little baggy for Lord Akeldama, although I think he would get pretty charmed and delighted when his drones started picking up on zoot suits. I'm not sure if he would wear one himself. After all, he doesn't affect the styles of the day in the Parasol Protectorate series. He's kind of stuck a little bit in the past. He tends to he goes for a Rococo look. About 100 years earlier. So he would probably be the same. He'd probably be still like sporting the striped fitted suit of the turn of the century with a boater or whatever. I can imagine him doing that into the 20s. Yes, exactly. Hanging out with the Fitzgeralds. Precisely. And I think on that note, I'm going to end this live. It's been awesome, as always, talking to you guys. Such a pleasure. And the next one, I've already listed the next live. It's going to be in November. This time I'm going to do a live about a week to 10 days after the launch of Romancing the Werewolf. And that hopefully will give you guys some time to read the story. Aw, there's an idea. And then ask me questions. So that'll be our Romancing the Werewolf live, and it's going to be November. So you can check out the website, and of course I'll tell you all about it closer to the time. So thanks for all your fantastic questions. And I don't think I have anything. Ooh, we're just a sneak peek for those of you who turned in. I'm going to be giving away a couple of these coming up on the newsletter. So the coveted limited edition hardbacks are coming up. So keep an eye out for that. And I love you all, and I'll see you next time.